I should have broken his jaw. I stood frozen in the doorway of my own bedroom, staring at the scene in front of me. My wife, Jessica, half-dressed, tangled in the sheets, her phone in her hand. And the worst part? She wasn't even alone. The bastard lying next to her? Ryan Carter. Her boss. She didn't even look surprised when she saw me. No gasp. No scrambling to cover herself. Just a slow, lazy smirk as she tilted her head. "Oh," she said, like I had walked in at the wrong time, like I was the one inconveniencing her. "You're home early." My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. My chest felt like it was going to explode. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times ever since I saw those messages, ever since I read every disgusting, backstabbing word she had sent him. But seeing it, right in front of me? Nothing could have prepared me for that. Ryan had the nerve to sit up, running a hand through his hair like this was some minor misunderstanding. "Listen, man, it's not what it looks like." I lunged. His body hit the floor before he could finish his sentence. "And Jessica?" She just laughed. Like this was some kind of joke. Like she hadn't just set fire to everything we built together. But she had no idea I wasn't just here to catch her. I was here to destroy her. Ryan groaned on the floor, clutching his jaw. My knuckles ached from the impact, but I didn't care. The pain was nothing compared to the fire burning inside me. Jessica? She just sat there, pulling the sheets up lazily around her like she was getting ready for a casual conversation over coffee. "Jesus, Adam," she sighed, rolling her eyes. "Did you have to be so dramatic?" "Dramatic." I could feel my pulse hammering against my skull. "Dramatic?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I walk in to find my wife in bed with her boss, and you think I'm being dramatic?" She smirked. "Well, yeah. I mean, what did you expect, Adam? You've been so boring lately." Boring. The word hit me harder than I hit Ryan. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the person I had loved, the person I had built a life with. But the more I looked, the more I realized this was the real her. Ryan groaned again, trying to push himself up from the floor. My foot shot out, pinning him down by his chest. "You move and I swear to God." "Enough." Jessica snapped, shaking her head like she was dealing with a misbehaving child. "Look, I get it. You're mad. But can we be adults about this?" Adults. My fists clenched again, and for a second I actually considered throwing another punch. But I forced myself to breathe. To think. I had a choice here. I could lose it, scream, punch, break things. Or I could play this smart. And if there was one thing I knew about Jessica, it was that she was reckless. Careless. She thought she was smarter than me. That was her biggest mistake. "You know what?" I exhaled slowly, stepping back. "You're right. Let's be adults about this." Ryan let out a relieved breath, pushing himself up as Jessica smirked. "See," she said. "I knew you'd come around. You should probably put some clothes on." I cut her off, my voice calm. "Because I'm calling my lawyer." The smirk vanished. "Excuse me." "You heard me," I said, grabbing my phone from my pocket. "This marriage? It's over. And you better believe I'm going to make sure you walk away with nothing." Jessica blinked, like she hadn't even considered the possibility that I wouldn't just take this and move on. That I wouldn't just accept it. "Adam," she started, her voice shifting, taking on that fake, sweet tone she used when she wanted something. "Come on, let's just talk about this." "Talk?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Oh, now you want to talk? Funny, because you didn't seem too interested in talking when you were texting him while sitting next to me on the couch. Or when you were sneaking around behind my back." Her face twisted into something uglier. "Oh, please," she scoffed, crossing her arms. "Like you're some innocent angel. You think you're such a victim here? You've been so wrapped up in your boring little life that you didn't even notice what was happening right in front of you." I stared at her, my fingers tightening around my phone. "You're unbelievable," I muttered. "Absolutely unbelievable." Ryan, who had been silent for the past few minutes, suddenly cleared his throat. "Look, man," he started, still rubbing his jaw. "I get that you're upset, but nothing," I snapped, turning my glare on him. "You knew she was married. You knew and you didn't care. So do me a favor, get your clothes, get out, and pray to God I don't press charges for trespassing." Ryan hesitated, glancing at Jessica like he expected her to defend him. But for once, she was quiet. "Go," I said. "Now." Muttering under his breath, Ryan grabbed his clothes off the floor and started dressing in a hurry. Jessica, however, stayed put, watching me like she was trying to figure out her next move. "You're not actually going to divorce me," she said after a moment, her voice dripping with confidence. "You don't have the balls." I smiled. "Watch me." She laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an apologetic one. A full, amused, arrogant laugh. "Adam," she said, shaking her head, "you really think you're going to come out of this the winner? You need me." Without me, you're nothing. I let out a breath, shaking my head. You know what's funny? I said, tilting my head. I used to think the same thing about you. That without you, my life wouldn't be the same. That I needed you. But now. I leaned in, my voice lowering. Now I see you for exactly what you are. Jessica's smirk faltered. Just a little. I turned toward the door, gesturing for Ryan to move his out. He hurried past me, practically running down the stairs. Jessica, however, stayed put. This isn't over, she said, her voice full of venom. Oh, I know, I said. That's the best part. I walked out, grabbed my car keys, and stepped into the night air. The second the door shut behind me, I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. This was just the beginning. But for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My heart was still hammering in my chest, my body still shaking from adrenaline. Jessica's laugh echoed in my ears, that smug, arrogant tone like she had already won. She thought I wouldn't go through with it. She thought I was weak. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think. Storming out like that was the right move. Jessica needed to believe she was in control. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I needed a plan. I unlocked my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't dialed in years. David Foster. One of the best divorce attorneys in the city. A ruthless, calculating who knew exactly how to dismantle people like Jessica. The phone rang twice before he answered. David Foster speaking. It's Adam, I said, my voice steady. I need a divorce. And I want to make sure my wife walks away with nothing. There was a pause. Then a low chuckle. Now that's a call I wasn't expecting, he said. All right, Adam. Tell me everything. I spent the next 30 minutes laying it all out. The affair. The texts. The fact that she had the audacity to bring her lover into my house, my bed. David listened in silence, only cutting in with questions when needed. When I was done, he let out a slow exhale. All right, he said. Here's the good news, you caught her red-handed. The bad news? California's a no-fault divorce state. That means her cheating doesn't automatically affect alimony or asset division. I gritted my teeth. So what do we do? You need leverage, he said. Evidence that she was using marital assets to fund this affair. If she spent any of your shared money on this guy, hotels, dinners, gifts, we can use that to destroy her in court. A slow smile crept across my face. Jessica was reckless. And I had a strong feeling she wasn't covering her tracks as well as she thought. I can get that, I said. Good, David replied. Also, don't move out of the house. If you leave, she can claim abandonment and that could screw you in negotiations. Stay put, act civil, and let her keep thinking she's in control. The idea of staying in that house with her made my stomach turn. But I wasn't going to let her push me out of my own life. You got it, I said. One last thing, David added. You need to play this smart. No yelling, no threats, no physical altercations. The more unhinged she looks, the better it is for you. Got it? I glanced down at my bruised knuckles. Yeah, I muttered. Got it. I drove back to the house around midnight. The lights were still on. Jessica was waiting for me. Perfect. I stepped inside, keeping my face unreadable. She was sitting on the couch, legs crossed, a glass of wine in her hand like she didn't have a single care in the world. Took you long enough, she said, swirling the wine. I didn't answer. I just walked past her, heading straight for the stairs. Running away again, she called after me, her voice laced with mockery. That's cute. I stopped, turned to face her. I spoke to a lawyer, I said. Something flickered in her eyes, but she masked it quickly. Oh, please, she scoffed. We both know you're not serious. I smirked. Keep thinking that. She narrowed her eyes, setting her wine glass down. You don't have the guts to go through with it, Adam. You never did. That's why this marriage got so boring. There it was again. That word. I clenched my jaw, keeping my expression neutral. Whatever you say, Jessica. I turned and headed upstairs, my pulse steady, my mind focused. I needed proof. I needed to know exactly how deep this affair went. And I had a plan to get it. I waited until Jessica fell asleep. Then I slipped into the office and powered up our shared computer. If she had been stupid enough to leave a paper trail, I was going to find it. I clicked into her email first. Nothing immediately suspicious, work emails, spam, shopping receipts. But then I spotted a folder labeled Personal tucked away under Archived Messages. I clicked it open. My blood ran cold. Receipts for hotel bookings. Expensive dinners. Charges on our joint credit card. She wasn't just screwing Ryan, she was using my money to fund their little love affair. My jaw tightened as I kept scrolling. Flights. Jewelry purchases. Even a weekend getaway to Miami. And then I found the worst one. A receipt for a down payment on an apartment. My stomach dropped. She was planning to leave me. Not only that, she was preparing to move in with him. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. This was bigger than I thought. Jessica wasn't just cheating, she was trying to build an entirely new life behind my back. And now? Now I had everything I needed to destroy her. As I shut down the computer, a dark sense of satisfaction settled over me. Jessica thought she had the upper hand. She had no idea what was coming. I closed the laptop slowly, my pulse steady. The evidence I had just gathered was everything I needed. Jessica had been careless, arrogant, and now she was about to pay for it. But if I was going to take her down, I needed to play this smart. I took a deep breath, leaned back in my chair, and forced myself to think. Jessica had already made a move, I just hadn't realized it until now. The down payment on the apartment, the planned escape. She wasn't just cheating, she was leaving. That meant two things. She thought she could string me along until she was ready to walk. She hadn't told Ryan yet. And that was an opportunity. I needed more leverage. The money trail was good, but if I could catch her in real time, if I could record a conversation proving everything, that would be the final nail in her coffin. I glanced at the clock. 2:30 a.m. I needed to get some sleep. Tomorrow, I was going to set the trap. I woke up to the smell of coffee drifting through the house. Jessica was in the kitchen acting like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't been caught. Like she wasn't planning to ruin my life. She turned and smiled at me, dressed in nothing but one of my t-shirts, her hair messily tied back. The same way she used to look when things were good. But now? Now I knew it was all a lie. Morning, she said, sipping her coffee. Sleep well. I met her gaze, keeping my expression neutral. Yeah, I lied. She leaned against the counter, watching me carefully. You stormed out last night. Did you cool off? There it was. She was testing me, trying to see if I was still angry, if I was still unpredictable. I shrugged, grabbing a mug. I thought about what you said. About being adults. Her lips curled into a smirk. See? I knew you'd come around. I took a slow sip of coffee, staring at her. You're right, I said. There's no point in fighting. If this is what you want, fine. Let's figure it out like adults. She studied me for a moment, and for the first time since this started, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I was supposed to be furious. Broken. But instead, I was calm. And that scared her. You mean that? She asked, tilting her head. I nodded. Yeah. But first, I think we should talk. I need to hear it from you. Everything. No more lies. Jessica hesitated. She wasn't stupid, she knew I was up to something. But her arrogance was her weakness. She wanted to rub it in my face. All right, she said, setting down her mug. Let's talk. The confession. We sat across from each other at the dining table. I placed my phone on the table, screen down, recording every word. I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady. So, how long? Jessica sighed, rolling her eyes like this was some exhausting conversation she'd been forced to have 100 times before. Does it matter? She said. I tilted my head. It does to me. She exhaled dramatically, crossing her arms. Fine. About a year. A year. The anger flared in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. And it was always Ryan? Jessica smirked. Mostly. I clenched my jaw. How did it start? She shrugged. I don't know, Adam. You got boring. Ryan paid attention to me. He made me feel alive again. I stared at her. And that justified everything? Jessica leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. Look, I'm not going to apologize. You stopped being the man I married. You got too comfortable. And guess what? I don't do comfortable. My nails dug into my palm. So that's your excuse? I was too stable for you. Jessica laughed, shaking her head. You never got it, Adam. You think love is enough? It's not. I need excitement. And you? You're just predictable. I nodded slowly. Right? Predictable. She smiled like she thought I was finally understanding her. So, what's next? I asked. You were planning on leaving, weren't you? Jessica's smirk faltered. I had her. Why do you think that? She asked carefully. I shrugged. Come on, Jessica. I'm not stupid. I saw the apartment down payment. Her face twisted into something unreadable. For the first time, she looked uneasy. You went through my stuff? She snapped. I smirked. So it's true. She inhaled sharply, shaking her head. You really don't know when to stop, do you? I leaned forward. No, Jessica. You don't. She pushed her chair back, standing up abruptly. This conversation is over. I stayed seated. Oh, I don't think so. Jessica glared at me. What are you going to do, Adam? Yell? Throw a tantrum? You're pathetic. I smiled. Then I reached for my phone, stopped the recording, and played it back. Her voice filled the room. I don't do comfortable. You got boring. I need excitement. A year. Mostly Ryan. I was planning on leaving. Jessica's face went pale. You. She whispered. You recorded me. I leaned back, crossing my arms. You were right about one thing, Jessica, I said. I was predictable. I smirked. Not anymore. She lunged for the phone, but I was faster. I grabbed it, slipping it into my pocket. Game over, I said. I win. Jessica stood there, breathing hard, her hands clenched into fists. And for the first time since this nightmare started, she looked scared. She had no idea just how bad this was about to get. Jessica stood frozen, her eyes locked on my pocket where my phone was safely tucked away. She looked like a cornered animal weighing her options, trying to decide if she could manipulate her way out of this. She couldn't. I had her. You really think this changes anything? She finally sneered, her voice shaking just a little. I tilted my head. Oh, it changes everything. She scoffed, crossing her arms. So what? You have a little recording. Big deal. That doesn't prove anything illegal. I smirked. You don't know much about divorce law, do you? Jessica opened her mouth to fire back, but I cut her off. See, sweetheart, I continued, leaning forward, what this does is paint a beautiful picture of who you really are. A manipulative, cheating, lying gold digger. And when we get to court and I bring this along with your spending records, that apartment down payment, the joint money you used for your little affair. Her jaw clenched. That, I said, grinning, is called marital fraud. Jessica's lips parted slightly, and for the first time she looked genuinely worried. I let the silence hang between us, enjoying the way her confidence cracked like glass. You wouldn't, she finally whispered, but it sounded more like she was trying to convince herself. I laughed. Wouldn't I? Oh, honey, I'm counting on it. Jessica's eyes darted around the room, searching for something, some way to turn this back on me. And then, just like that, she snapped back into her usual arrogance. You're pathetic, Adam, she spat. You think you've won? You think I care about some stupid divorce? Go ahead, take your little evidence to your lawyer. You still won't win. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? And why's that? Her smirk returned. Because I know you. You don't have it in you to really hurt me. You can pretend all you want, but in the end, you're still just the same weak little man I married. I chuckled. You're right about one thing. She blinked. I stood up slowly, shoving my hands into my pockets. I was weak. I let you walk all over me. I ignored the red flags. I trusted you. I shook my head. That was my mistake. Jessica's confidence wavered again, but she kept up her front. So what now? She taunted. You think you're some kind of big shot just because you caught me? You're still just a loser who got cheated on. I exhaled, shaking my head. You really don't get it, do you? She narrowed her eyes. I stepped closer, dropping my voice to a near whisper. You lost the second I walked into this room. Jessica opened her mouth, but I didn't wait for her response. I turned and headed for the door. Where are you going? She demanded. I didn't look back. To see my lawyer. I heard something shatter behind me, probably her wine glass, but I didn't care. Let her throw her tantrum. She had no idea what was coming next. I pulled into David Foster's office an hour later. He was already waiting for me, leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled. You look like a man with good news, he said. I grinned, pulling out my phone and hitting play. David listened to the recording in silence, nodding occasionally. When it ended, he leaned back, exhaling. Jesus, he muttered. She really thought she had you wrapped around her finger, huh? I smirked. Not anymore. David drummed his fingers on the desk. All right, here's what we do. First, we file for divorce immediately. No warnings, no discussions. Just hit her with it. Next, we freeze the joint accounts before she tries to drain them. I nodded. Done. David grinned. Then we drop the marital fraud bomb on her. The second she realizes she could be financially ruined, she's going to panic. I smirked. Good. Even better, David continued, if we prove she misused marital assets, we can eliminate her claim to alimony. I whistled lowly. So she really could end up with nothing? David grinned. Oh, she's not just going to end up with nothing, she's going to owe you. I let that sink in. Jessica had spent the past year treating me like I was disposable. Like I was some boring, predictable idiot who would never fight back. And now? Now she was about to lose everything. Dropping the bomb. I got home late that night. Jessica was waiting for me, arms crossed, eyes burning with fury. You were with your lawyer, she snapped. I smirked. Yep. Her nostrils flared. You really think you're gonna take me down? I shrugged. I don't think, Jessica. I know. She laughed, but it was forced. You're so full of. You think some fancy lawyer is gonna scare me. I stepped closer. You should check your email. She frowned, pulling out her phone. The second she saw the message, her face drained of color. Filed for divorce, I said, watching her closely. Joint accounts? Frozen. Lawyer? Already has the evidence. You have no leverage. Jessica's hands shook as she scrolled through the documents. Her voice cracked. You can't do this. I leaned in. I just did. Her eyes snapped to mine, pure hatred blazing behind them. You son of a... I cut her off. I told you, Jessica. You lost the second I walked into that room. She stared at me, breathing hard, realization dawning in her eyes. She had nothing. No money. No control. No way out. For the first time in our entire relationship, Jessica was powerless. And I was finally free. Jessica stood there, gripping her phone so tightly I half expected it to shatter. Her eyes darted across the divorce papers, the legal notices, the frozen account warnings. Every ounce of arrogance had drained from her face, replaced by something I'd never seen in her before, fear. I savored the moment. She stammered, swallowing hard. You think you're so smart, don't you? I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. No, Jessica. I know I am. Her nostrils flared. You can't do this to me. I chuckled. Oh, sweetheart, I already did. She let out a shaky breath, shaking her head. You're not like this, Adam. This isn't you. I tilted my head. And what exactly am I supposed to be? The pathetic husband you walk all over? The guy who just accepts being betrayed? I stepped closer. Sorry to disappoint, but that guy? He's dead. Jessica clenched her jaw, her breathing uneven. She was breaking, unraveling before my eyes. And I enjoyed every second of it. You need me, she hissed. I laughed. For what? A lifetime of lies? She set her jaw, her fingers tightening around her phone. You're making a mistake, Adam. I smirked. The only mistake I made was not seeing you for what you were sooner. She flinched. Just slightly. And then, just like that, the fear in her eyes flickered into something else, desperation. The desperate bargain. Jessica inhaled deeply, forcing a sweet smile onto her face. Okay, she said, her voice suddenly softer, calmer. I get it. You're angry. And you have every right to be. I raised an eyebrow. Let's not let this turn ugly, she continued, stepping toward me. I mean, we did have something good once, didn't we? I scoffed. That something died the second you texted Ryan while sitting next to me. She winced. But she kept going. Look, I messed up, she said, placing a hand on my arm. But we don't have to destroy each other over this. Let's talk. Really talk. I looked down at her hand, then back up at her. You're trying to manipulate me, I said flatly. Her lips twitched. No, I'm trying to save us. I laughed, actually laughed. Save us? Us is dead, Jessica. You killed it. She blinked rapidly, like she wasn't used to hearing the truth so bluntly. Then she tried one last play. You love me, Adam, she whispered. I know you do. I stared at her for a long moment. Then, very calmly, I leaned in and whispered back. Not anymore. She recoiled like I had slapped her. I stepped back, shaking my head. You should start looking for somewhere else to live. Because this house? It's mine. Jessica's breath hitched. What? You heard me, I said. You think I'm just kicking you out of my life? No, sweetheart, I'm kicking you out of my house too. Her eyes widened. You can't do that. I smirked. Watch me. The final blow. Jessica was spiraling now. She knew she had no power left. No money. No control. I pulled out my phone and tapped a few buttons. Jessica's own voice played back at full volume. I don't do comfortable. You got boring. I need excitement. A year. Mostly Ryan. I was planning on leaving. She went white. You recorded me, she whispered. I nodded. Her body trembled and she suddenly lunged for my phone. I stepped back easily, shaking my head. You really thought I wouldn't be prepared for that? She glared at me, breathing hard. Jessica, I said, slipping my phone back into my pocket. This is how it ends. You lose. I win. She was shaking now, fists clenched, teeth gritted. Then suddenly she laughed. A broken, bitter laugh. You think you won? She spat. Fine. Take your stupid divorce. Take your stupid house. But you know what, Adam? You're still a loser. You'll never find anyone better than me. I just smiled. Oh, I already have. Her smirk faltered. I leaned in, voice calm. The version of me that doesn't need you? He's the best thing that ever happened to me. Jessica's jaw tightened. Her lips pressed into a thin line. And for the first time in our entire relationship, she had nothing left to say. She had lost. And she knew it. The aftermath. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The divorce papers were filed. The accounts were frozen. Jessica was going to be out of my life for good. And the best part? I wasn't bitter. I wasn't broken. I was free. The next morning, I walked downstairs to find Jessica packing a suitcase. She didn't say a word, didn't look at me, just threw her things into a bag with quick, jerky movements. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Need help? I asked casually. She shot me a death glare. I smirked. Take your time, I said. Just don't take anything I paid for. Her fists clenched, but she said nothing. She had no power anymore. And she knew it. As she zipped up the suitcase, she turned to me one last time. You'll regret this, she spat. I shrugged. Doubt it. She stormed past me, yanking the front door open. I watched as she dragged her suitcase down the steps, her posture stiff, her face red with humiliation. And then, without another word, she was gone. I exhaled deeply, the weight of years of betrayal lifting off my shoulders. Jessica was finally out of my life. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited about what came next. The silence in the house was deafening. For the first time in years, there were no fake apologies, no passive-aggressive remarks, no sounds of Jessica's high heels clicking against the floor as she strutted around like she owned the place. She was gone. And I had one. I took a deep breath, standing in the middle of the living room, taking it all in. The air felt lighter. The walls no longer suffocated me. This house, my house, finally felt like mine again. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a coffee, and leaned against the counter. No tension, no lies lingering in the air. Just peace. But I wasn't done yet. Jessica thought she could just disappear, lick her wounds, and maybe come back for round 2? Not a chance. I grabbed my phone and called David. Morning, Adam, he answered. How's life as a free man? I smirked. It's about to get even better. David chuckled. I like the sound of that. What's next? I want to make sure she has nowhere to turn, I said. I want full control of the house, the finances, everything. She gets nothing. David whistled. You really don't want to leave her with a safety net, huh? I took a sip of coffee. Nope. All right, he said, amusement in his voice. I already drafted the final settlement terms. If she doesn't agree, we drag this to court. And trust me, she won't want that. Good, I said. Let's finish this. Jessica's final desperation. It didn't take long. 2 days later, I got a text. Jessica, we need to talk. I smirked. She was cracking. I took my time responding, letting her sit in her own desperation for a while. Finally, I replied. Me, about what? Her response came instantly. Jessica, meet me. One last time. We don't have to fight. I knew better than to believe that. But I agreed. Not because I thought she had changed, because I wanted to see her break one last time. The last conversation. I met Jessica at a small cafe. She was already there, sitting at a corner table, oversized sunglasses covering her face. She looked different, less confident, more fragile. I sat down across from her, casually stirring my coffee. You wanted to talk, I said flatly. Jessica took off her sunglasses, revealing bloodshot eyes. Had she been crying? Adam, she started, voice soft, almost pleading. We don't have to do this. I raised an eyebrow. Do what? This, she gestured vaguely. Destroy each other. I chuckled. Jessica, I'm not being destroyed. Just you. She swallowed hard, fingers gripping her coffee cup. You don't have to be so cruel about it. I tilted my head. Cruel? You mean like cheating on your husband for a year and using his money to fund it? Jessica flinched. I leaned forward. You ruined this marriage, Jessica. Not me. You had every chance to walk away before you started sneaking around. But instead, you lied, you used me, and you thought I'd just roll over and take it. She exhaled sharply. I did love you, Adam. I smirked. No, you loved what I gave you. Stability. Security. A comfortable life. But the second you got bored, you threw it all away. Jessica stared at me, her lips pressing together. Then, just like that, her fake vulnerability vanished. Fine, she snapped, pushing back in her chair. You want me to beg? Not happening. I sipped my coffee. Didn't expect you to. Her jaw tightened. Ryan left me. I raised an eyebrow. He found out I had no money coming in, she admitted bitterly. Didn't want to be with a broke, unemployed divorcee. I smirked. Sounds like karma. Jessica clenched her fists. You think this is funny? I shrugged. A little. Her eyes burned with rage, but there was nothing left for her to do. She had lost. Jessica exhaled sharply, standing up. You'll regret this, Adam. I smiled. I doubt it. She hesitated like she was waiting for me to soften, to change my mind. I didn't. Jessica turned and walked out of the cafe. And just like that, she was gone. The end of an era. I sat there for a long time, staring at the door she had walked out of. This was it. The final chapter. No more Jessica. No more lies. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and deleted her number. Then I called David. "It's done," I said. "Good," he replied. "The papers are finalized. She gets nothing. You're officially free, Adam." I let out a slow breath, a weight lifting off my chest. "How does it feel?" David asked. I smiled. Like a brand new life just started. And for the first time in years, I was excited to live it. The moment I hung up the phone with David, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. No more Jessica. No more betrayal hanging over my head like a storm cloud. I was free. And yet, as I sat there in that cafe, watching people go about their normal lives, a thought crept into my mind. What now? For the past year, my life had been defined by this war with Jessica. Every move I made was about outplaying her, exposing her, making sure she lost. And now that it was over, I had won. But I didn't just want to win, I wanted to thrive. I got up from my chair, walked outside, and took a deep breath. The air felt different, lighter, cleaner. I wasn't carrying her weight anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was a man starting over. And I was damn ready for it. Rebuilding myself. The first thing I did when I got home was walk through every room and reclaim my space. I got rid of every trace of Jessica, her clothes, her perfume, the tacky decorations she insisted on. I wanted nothing of hers left in my house. By the end of the day, the place looked different. It looked like mine. The next step? Me. Jessica had called me boring, predictable. She thought she had me figured out, thought I'd never change. But she was wrong. I wasn't just going to rebuild my life, I was going to rebuild myself. I hit the gym harder than ever before. I started dressing better, fixing the things about myself that I had neglected, not for her, not to impress anyone, but for me. And it felt good. Every day that passed, I felt more like the man I was meant to be. Stronger. Smarter. Sharper. I wasn't some clueless husband anymore. I was a man who had survived and come out better. And the best part? Jessica had to watch it happen. Jessica's fall. It didn't take long for the news to spread. Jessica had no job. No money. No support. She had burned every bridge, and now she was living the consequences. A few weeks after our last meeting, I got a text from an unknown number. Unknown, "Hey, can we talk?" I smirked. I knew exactly who it was. Me, new phone. Who's this? A pause. Then, "Jessica, it's me." I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. "Me, lose my number." And just like that, I erased her from my life for good. The best ending. 6 months later, I stood in front of my house, the same house Jessica tried to take from me. Except now, it felt different. It wasn't a place full of bad memories. It was mine. I had rebuilt everything from the ground up. My career was thriving, my health was at its peak, and most importantly, I was happy. No bitterness. No resentment. Just freedom. Jessica thought she had destroyed me. But in reality, she had set me free. And that was the best revenge of all.